From Elevate Digital, the Vocal Minority Report presents the Negro News Minute. Dateline, New York. The country's first Muslim judge, first black woman to serve on New York's highest court, has been found dead on the bank of the Hudson River. Sheila Abdul Salam, who was 65, made history as an African-American Muslim judge. She was nominated by New York Governor Andrew Cuomo to the state's Court of Appeals in 2013. Judge Sheila Abdul Salam was a trailblazing jurist whose life in public service was in pursuit of a more fair and more just New York for all, said Governor Andrew Cuomo. He also said, as the first African-American woman to be appointed to the state's Courts of Appeals, she was a pioneer. Through her writings, her wisdom, and her unshakable moral compass, she was a force for good whose legacy will be felt for years to come. I was proud to appoint her to the state's highest court, and am deeply saddened by her passing. On behalf of all New Yorkers, I extend my deepest sympathies to her family, loved ones, and colleagues during this trying and difficult time. Judge Abdul Salam was also a classmate of former U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder while at Columbia University. Holder had these remarks on his friend at her swearing-in ceremony for her Court of Appeals appointment. Sheila could boogie, but there was a seriousness about her, a strong sense of purpose at a relatively young age. She never forgot where she came from. Officers with the New York Police Department's Harbor Unit responded about 1:45 p.m. to a report of a person floating by the shore near West 132nd Street in Upper Manhattan. Judge Abdul Salam was taken to a pier on the Hudson River and was pronounced dead by paramedics shortly after 2 p.m. Police were investigating how she ended up in the river, and it was not clear how long the judge, who lived nearby in Harlem, had been missing. There was no signs of trauma on her body, the police said, and she was fully clothed. A law enforcement official said investigators had found no signs of criminality. Her husband was the one to identify her body. On the court, Judge Abdul Salam was among the most reliable and steadfast liberal voices, regularly siding with vulnerable parties like the poor, impoverished immigrants, and people with mental illnesses. She also tended to lean toward injured parties who brought claims of misconduct, fraud, or breach of contract against wealthy corporations. Among her colleagues, she was admired for her thoughtfulness, her candor, and her finely crafted and restrained writing style. She was not one to use her decisions as a soapbox to make high-sounding political points or to wax poetic, even when her rulings were precedent-setting.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I, too, rise in support of Judge Sheila Abdul Salam. I congratulate the governor on having the vision for putting forward such a wonderful, experienced nomination to this Senate today. It's very easy to be supportive of this nomination. Judge, your history is helping us today to make history. And tomorrow in this Senate, we will be celebrating women of distinction from all across New York State. Well, today, we have the honor of celebrating a woman of distinction for all of us, no matter where we're from. And all the way from Buffalo, New York, I can tell you that it's an incredible honor and pleasure to be supportive of the governor's nomination today, the first African-American woman in the history of the state to be appointed to the Court of Appeals. That's something that is worth being proud of. That is something worth celebrating, and absolutely that is something worth supporting, and I do so with all great respect for you, Judge, and the work that brought you to this level. And with that, I vote aye.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy.
That was New York State Senator Timothy Kennedy speaking on Judge Sheila Abdul Salam's nomination. I thought it captured some of the regard she was held in. Dateline, South Sudan. Is there a genocide happening in Sudan? According to Britain's Secretary for International Development, Priti Patel, the killings and other atrocities going on in South Sudan amount to genocide, and African leaders need to step up and not just rely on others for a response. There's been mass violence since July when fighting broke out in the capital, Juba, and has spread to several other areas. The fighting erupted between forces loyal to President Salva Kiir and his former Vice President Riek Machar, who come from rival ethnic groups. Patel also told journalists in neighboring Uganda that President Kiir's government was blocking access to aid. There are massacres taking place, people's throats are being slit, villages are being burned out, there's a scorched earth policy, she said. It is tribal, it is absolutely tribal, so on that basis it is genocide, she also said. The mass exodus and widespread insecurity across South Sudan has left farm fields deserted, which has led to severe food shortages. In February, the United Nations declared famine in some parts of the country, and it appears that the government was actively blocking aid and using food as a weapon of war. The July 2016 fighting exploded just as the oil-producing country was still reeling from its first civil war, which broke out in 2013 after Kiir sacked Machar from his vice presidency position. That conflict ended in a peace pact in 2015, and Machar was returned to his vice presidency position early last year. But tensions between the two men lingered and finally led to the latest violence. The UK is calling for African heads of state to do more and not just rely on others in the international community. Dateline, Miami, Florida. North Miami Police Department officer Jonathan Alida, who shot Charles Kinsey, an unarmed black man in July, has been arrested. You might remember that Kinsey is a behavioral therapist who at the time was caring for a severely autistic man. Kinsey had his hands in the air and was laying on his back when he was shot in the leg. Officer Jonathan Alida was charged with attempted manslaughter, a felony, and culpable negligence and misdemeanor, according to the Miami-Dade State's Attorney's Office. Alida defended his actions last July, saying, "I did what I had to do in a split second." The officer was responding to reports of a man with a gun and apparently was aiming at the autistic man when he shot Kinsey, according to an affidavit supporting the arrest warrant filed with the state court for Miami-Dade County. The affidavit said Alida fired 3 shots using his personally owned Colt M4 carbine rifle from about 150 feet where Kinsey lay.
Charles Kinsey laid in the middle of the road on his back, his hands in the air. North Miami police aimed their rifles at him. He is a therapist and was trying to help a confused autistic man who wandered away from a group home. Kinsey says he complied with the officer's demands.
When I went to the ground, I'm going to the ground just like this here with my hands up. And I'm laying down here just like this. And I'm telling him again, sir, there's no need for a firearm. I'm unarmed. He's an autistic guy. He had a toy truck in his hand.
Police were called to the area by someone who claimed there was a man with a gun. Kinsey says there was no gun, just his client holding a toy truck, which was clearly visible to the officers.
I was really more worried about him than myself, because I'm looking at, as long as I got my hands up, they're not going to shoot me. This is what I'm thinking. They're not going to shoot me. Wow, was I wrong?
Wrong, because Kinsey was then shot in the leg. It wasn't caught on camera, but he says he had his hands up the entire time.
When he hit me, I'm like, I still got my hands in the air. I say, no, I just got shot. And I'm saying to him, I'm like, sir, why did you shoot me? And his words to me, he said, I don't know.
Kinsey says the officers rushed him, patted him down, found there was no weapon, and then handcuffed him.
They flipped me over, and I'm face down in the ground with cuffs on, waiting on the rescue squad to come. I say about 20 minutes took the rescue squad to get there. And I was bleeding. Yes, bleeding. Bleeding. And I was like, wow.
7 News was there as Kinsey was taken to Jackson Memorial Hospital.
My life flashed right in front of me. You know what I mean? Because when he hit me, my first thing I'm thinking about my family.
He's like, please don't shoot me. But why they shot the black boy and not the fat boy?
You know, because they were the blacks, you know.
No other officer on the scene observed the autistic man exhibit any behavior that compelled them to shoot, the affidavit says. Dateline, the White House. Here are 3 Trump stories in one. We'll quick hit these. Number 1, the value of the dollar slid to a 2-week low after Trump told the Wall Street Journal that the dollar was, quote, getting too strong and would hurt the U.S. economy. This led to the greenback and U.S. Treasury yields taking a heavy hit. Trump's comments broke a long-standing practice of both U.S. Democratic and Republican administrations of refraining from commenting on policies set by the independent Federal Reserve. It is also unusual for a president to talk about the value of the dollar, a subject usually left to the U.S. Treasury Secretary. This is a dramatic shift in rhetoric from Trump, said Iron FX analyst Sakis Paraskov. Speaking of dramatic shifts, here's story number 2. On Tuesday, Trump at a White House press conference and in a newspaper interview abruptly shifted his stance on an array of foreign policy issues, according to a Reuters report. Most notably, the U.S. relationship with Russia and China and the NATO alliance. He said his relationship with Moscow was souring while ties with Beijing were improving. He also lavished praise on NATO, saying it was adapting to the changing global threats. Speaking specifically on NATO, he commented, quote, "I said it was obsolete. It is no longer obsolete." He went on to say that we may be at an all-time low in terms of relationship with Russia. This, of course, after last week's missile strike against Syria. All of this comes after an apparent break of ties with his chief strategist, Steve Bannon, saying of Bannon on Tuesday, "I like Steve, but you have to remember he was not involved in my campaign until very late." Dang, I should have used my Trump voice. "I like Steve." Nah, okay, it doesn't work. So anyway, and here's story number 3. Speaking of things Trump has said, we created over 600,000 jobs already over a very short period of time, and it's going to really start catching on. That was a quote from Trump Tuesday at the White House. But I bet I don't have to tell you that all of that isn't true. According to CNN Money's, there's actually a Trump's job tracker. There's been 317,000 jobs created since Trump took office. It appears he's trying to take credit for nearly double that number of jobs. Trump likes to count job promises, frequently referring to companies he's influenced like Ford, Charter Communications, GM, and ExxonMobil to hire more workers, even though some of those businesses themselves refuse to give Trump credit for their hiring decisions. CNN Money also says the reality is the economy has added an average of 178,000 jobs so far this year. That's very close to and even slightly lower than the average last year, which was 187,000 a month when President Obama was in office. Dateline San Francisco. On Tuesday of this week, Uber's chief executive Travis Kalanick confirmed in an email to employees that the company's head of policy and communications, Rachel Whetstone, was leaving amicably and of her own volition. Ms. Whetstone leaves after having steered Uber through scandals, pun intended, I'm sure, according to the New York Times. Uber has lost a string of top managers in recent months as the ride-hailing company has dealt with scandals over its workplace culture and its executives' behavior. There was a grassroots campaign that urged people to delete the Uber app after the company was apparently erroneously perceived to have capitalized on President Trump's executive order to ban immigrants from several Muslim-majority countries. In addition, a former employee in a public blog post detailed a history of harassment at the hands of an Uber manager, prompting an internal investigation and questions over the company's culture. I count 4 other top executives who have also left recently. Staying on Uber, they're also in the news for stalking. According to an article by CNET writer Michelle Starr, apparently from 2014 to early 2016, Uber was using a program called Hell to stalk Lyft drivers. The software was able to see how many Lyft drivers were available for passengers, where they were, and which of them worked for both Lyft and Uber. The program called Hell involved the use of software that used fake passenger accounts, spoofing their locations to find out about the nearby available Lyft drivers. They spread these spoofed accounts out on a grid. Uber could see almost the entire city. Using the information they gathered, they could coax these drivers to work for Uber only by offering incentives. If proven, the use of this program could open Uber up to prosecution, including claims of unfair business practices, misappropriation of trade secrets, computer fraud, and a breach of contract, since Lyft's terms of service prohibit impersonation. Last month, Uber ceased using an app called Greyball that was designed to help it bypass local laws. Well, I tell you what, man. For Elevate Digital, the Vocal Minority Report, this has been the Negro News Minute. All power to the people. Peace.